Welcome to the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, hosted by your favourite duo, Stephen and Charlene. They're here to help you transform your mindset and create a positive outlook on life. Are you tired of feeling stuck and unfulfilled? Are you ready to take control of your thoughts and emotions and rewrite your story? Well, you're in the right place. They will be sharing inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you on your journey to a better you. You'll learn how to let go of negative self-talk, embrace your strengths, and focus on the good things in life. Each episode will be joined by amazing guests who have rewritten their own life stories and are now living their best lives. From successful entrepreneurs to accomplished athletes, we'll bring you stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, and get ready to be inspired. Tune in every week for a new episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Let's rewrite our stories together and make every day count.
In this episode, we interview Kevin Palmeri, who is a CFO, founder, and co-host of the Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,450 episodes and 850,000 listens in over 150 countries.
Before we get started, we want to remind you that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own and do not represent the views of any organisation or entity. Additionally, any information presented should not be taken as legal, medical, or financial advice. Always consult with a licensed professional in the respective field for any advice or guidance. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic and learn how to transform our lives through positive thinking and taking control of our stories. Thanks for joining us.
Before we begin, we want to give you a heads up. We may be discussing some sensitive and personal topics that might bring up some strong emotions or discomfort. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space, but we know that everyone's experiences and triggers are different. If you start feeling overwhelmed or triggered during an episode, remember to prioritize your well-being. It's totally okay to hit pause and take a breath. Your self-care is important, and looking after your mental and emotional health should always come first. If you ever need extra support, we encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional or someone you trust. You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you on your personal journey. Thank you for joining us on this incredible ride with the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Together we'll navigate life's challenges and rewrite our narratives with strength and resilience.
Hey everyone, it's Stephen and Charlene, and welcome to another episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Today we're super excited. We have Kevin Palmeri all the way from New Hampshire, and he is the founder of Next Level University. But not only is he the founder of Next Level University, he's absolutely crushing it with his own podcast and everything he does. So Kevin, welcome to the podcast today.
Stephen, Charlene, thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to chat. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Hopefully I can live up to the energy you have given me.
I know you will. So Kevin, before we start into what you're doing today, take us right back to the beginning. Like, where were the moments, the key moments that changed your life? Tell us your story before you rewrote it.
I was raised by my mom and my grandmother in a lower middle class home. I did not know my dad. I didn't meet my dad with the understanding that he was my father until I was 27. So obviously that plays a key role in a young man's life. And I don't think I really understood the level of importance that had until later in life. So I'm sure we'll dive into that as well. But my childhood, other than that, was normal, whatever that means. I don't know if anybody has a normal anything because normal is subjective. But when things really started to kind of pivot for me was in high school, because I never liked school, and I could not imagine after high school going to school for another 4 years. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to do college. So I made the decision pretty early into high school that I'm not going to go to college. I don't care. I'm not interested. I don't care what my guidance counselor has to say. So all my friends went off to college, and I stayed back and I pumped gas at the local gas station. And that was my first big boy job. And I did that for a few years. And then I went on to clean hospital floors and toilets as one of my jobs. I was a personal trainer. I was a truck driver, forklift operator, on-call firefighter for a very short time, construction, tiling, all sorts of different things. In my early 20s, I got a very unique opportunity in an industry called weatherization. So all that means is it was our job to go into these large buildings, usually schools, and it was our job to make the buildings more energy efficient. So we'd work in the attics, we'd retrofit the windows, the doors, all that stuff. So I quite literally went from making $15 an hour as somebody that working in construction to $60 an hour with this new job. So in my mind, I was like, cool, this not going to college thing paid off. The rest of my life's going to be amazing. This is awesome. So if you were to zoom into my life when I was 25, I had a high paying job. My girlfriend at the time was a model. I had just competed in and won a bodybuilding show. I had my dream car, new apartment. I quite literally, from the external, was crushing it. But internally, I was very insecure. I was very uncertain. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was a shell of a person. Really, that's probably the best way to explain it. And one day, my ex-girlfriend now, she came to me and said, I want to move from the East Coast of the US to California, which is on the West Coast. And I have these big goals, these big dreams. I have a lot of ambition and I really want to chase it. And in my insecurity, in my scarcity, I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it. Gas prices are too high, real estate's too high, blah, 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 blah. When the truth of the matter was, I was just afraid of being left behind. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel enough for her. Go figure. She ended up leaving me behind, as she should have. And when she did, that was my initial rock bottom. Here I am living by myself in this apartment. My bills effectively have just doubled. The person I love has left me and I feel very unlovable. Work is slow, so I'm not making a lot of money. I am really struggling with the opposite side of the bodybuilding show where now I kind of have a little bit of an eating disorder, at least it feels like it. So I went from the high to hitting my initial rock bottom. And I remember one night before I went to bed, I said, I really want to be confident. I really want to be happy. I really want to be proud of myself. But more than anything, I want to make a boatload of money. If I go make a boatload of more money, less problems will probably exist. So I'm going to do that. So that next year starts and I got a promotion at my job. And since we worked on large state contracts, I traveled a lot. So that next year, I spent 10 months living on the road every single week, different states, different cities, different hotels, different time zones, different shifts. It was mayhem, but it was in a direct alignment with the goals I had set. So I was all in. And this all led to me making $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. But I had a real moment of pivot and realization. I sliced open my final pay stub of the year and I made the money. And I had this moment where I said, I really feel like I should be happier. I should be more fulfilled. I should feel more accomplished. And I realized that for most of my life, and especially that year, I had lived unconsciously. I don't know why I was doing what I was doing. I have no idea. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast in 2017 called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job. I've reached the pinnacle. I don't want to do it again. I'm sick of sleeping in crusty hotels. I don't want to do this. But as you know, in the beginning, there's not exactly a line out the door of people giving you money for your podcast. So I wasn't making any money and I had to keep paying the bills. And I often say that I was so homesick. It wasn't like I got up and I drove to the office and then I got to come home at night. I was living on the road for that entire week. So I was just homesick. It was so hard for me to go live in these hotels. So I start calling out of work. I start leaving the job sites early, showing up late. I am not a good employee at this point. And it all culminated with me waking up in a hotel room in New Jersey, which is 6 hours away from where I was living at the time. My alarm clock went off at 5:15. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed, and I was lacing up my work boot. I've done this 1,000 times before. But that morning, it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one is saying you're stuck here forever. Not only do people like you not get jobs like this, they don't leave them behind. If you do work up the courage/recklessness to leave this, what will your friends think? What will your family think? And what are you going to do with your life? You didn't have a plan A. This kind of was your plan B. I don't even know if they make plan Cs. And it was in that moment that I found out rock bottom has a basement. And I thought to myself, if I take my life, I will take my problems with me. And that was where I was in that moment. I felt hopeless, helpless, trapped, stuck. That was it. I didn't want to be here anymore. Now, luckily, I'm very blessed and very privileged to have amazing people around me. So I messaged who was a friend at the time, who's now my business partner and the co-host of our show. And I said, Alan, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. I don't know what to do, man. What do I do? And he said many things in his wisdom. But the thing that stuck out the most was over the last few years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. Okay. I don't know what any of that means. But 3 or 4 months later, I ended up leaving my job. And then in 2018, that's when I started this full time. So 6 years ago almost, I have been a full-time podcaster, speaker, coach, entrepreneur, whatever I am, whatever you want to consider me. That all started in 2018 for me.
Really powerful, isn't it? The fact that you were able to recognize that, yes, you had an initial rock bottom and then realizing that that had a basement and knowing that, well, just having that courage to reach out to someone is pretty amazing.
Thank you. One of the analogies I always use is you do not build an umbrella during the storm. You have to assemble it long before it starts to rain. And I had such a good relationship with Alan. I felt safe enough to be vulnerable with him. And unfortunately, I know there's a lot of people out there that might not have that opportunity. They might not have that privilege. Things might be going really good right now. I think we need to prepare for the stormy weather. And that's by trying to start to be vulnerable right now and just finding somebody in your circle that you feel safe telling the truth. That's all vulnerability is. Vulnerability is living in the truth. And I was blessed enough and encouraged enough that day to live in the truth, and that allowed me to continue living life. And I'm very, very grateful that I reached out to the person I did, for sure.
That's such a powerful statement. Vulnerability is living in your truth. Now, why is that important?
Well, I mean, we can go a million directions in that, right? If you want to facilitate change in your life, it must come from a place of understanding that you're not exactly excited about where you are or where you're going. And that's vulnerable and courageous to look in the mirror and say, I don't remember that's what it looked like. Or looking in your bank account. It's a vulnerable feeling to feel broke and then open up your bank account and then have that moment where you're like, ooh, I was hoping there was going to be more digits in there. Been there for sure. And it's vulnerable to sit down with somebody you love and you care about deeply and say, hey, I'm feeling stifled. I'm feeling unheard. I'm feeling unvalued. I'm feeling triggered. You're living in the truth, but living in the truth is so hard. One of my favorite thought processes off of this is being ourselves is what we really all aspire toward, but that also might be the hardest thing in the world. Because if I pretend to be someone I'm not and you don't like me, not that big of a deal. That's not even who I really am. But if I show up and I try to be the most authentic, vulnerable, aligned version of myself, and you say, yeah, you're not for me, Kev. Oh my goodness, that hurts. This is who I am. I'm trying to be myself. So vulnerability, courage, that's all super important, living in the truth. Because if you're not living in the truth, you're not really existing to the level you could. And then we could pivot off of that. I believe the level of your relationships, the quality of them, is directly connected to how much vulnerability you have in them. If I came on here and said, my life's perfect, I've never had any issues, this is just how I am all the time, it's awesome. You wouldn't know who I really am. And we would never have the same level of relationship we could if we were just very honest about the things we've gone through. So without the truth, it's very hard to create the necessity to actually change. You can either change your perception or you can change your behavior. And when you change your perception, you can lie to yourself. But when you're honest with yourself and you sit in the truth, it at least creates the opportunity to change our behavior.
Thank you, Kevin. In your original story, you mentioned that you grew up without a father and you met him at 26 or 27. Do you want to speak into that experience for us and what impact that had you as an adult?
I will never forget this day. I was sitting on my recliner. I lived by myself. My girlfriend had left me. I was just riding solo. And for some reason, I was going through my Facebook messages and I didn't realize that if someone is not friends with you and they send you a message, it goes to a completely separate folder. I didn't know that. So one day I was cleaning out this folder and I came across this message, and you can only see the first line. That's how they get you. And it said, "Hey, Kevin, I am blank. I'm your father's girlfriend." And I remember saying, "Oh, no. Today is not the day. It's Saturday. We are not going to read this today. I do not have that in me." And then I sat with it for a second and said, "All right, let me see what I can do." So I opened it up and it said, "Hey, Kevin, I'm blank. I'm your father's girlfriend. And he has seen you on Facebook. It looks like you're doing really well. He wants you to know that he is proud of you. And if you would like the opportunity to meet, he would appreciate that very much. And if you want, I can set that up." And I remember throwing my phone on the floor, falling on the floor, and just starting to cry my eyes out. Maybe not for the reason you might think. I had villainized this man for my entire life. And it's really easy to say some hurtful things about someone if you never anticipate having to see them. And I think I came to the realization of, okay, I have said some negative things about this man. I never thought I was going to have a chance to see him. I never thought I'd want to see him. So I sat with it and I messaged one of my friends and I said, "Yeah, my dad texted me." They knew my past pretty well. And they said, "Are you going to go see him?" And I said, "I think I have to." And they said, "Do you want me to come with you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. But no, I think this is something I have to do alone." So I messaged him back. We set up a time, set up a place. We ended up meeting halfway between where we each lived. So I pulled up to this diner. I tend to be early, right? I was like a minute early in the waiting room. That's just how I am. I like to be early. And I pull up, I walk in, I get a booth, and I had this very humbling, surreal moment of, I don't know what this man looks like. So how am I going to figure out when he gets here? Well, he saw me on Facebook. He must know what I look like. Okay, I guess that's good enough. So I'm sitting in the booth facing the window. And I remember this guy walked by. And somehow I said, "Okay, that's him. That's my dad. Here we go. Cue the sweat. All right, here we go." And he walked in and he sat down. He found me. And it was about as awkward as I think you could imagine. It was two people who are complete strangers who are supposed to have unconditional love for one another trying to catch up on 27 years. So very strange. But he kind of apologized and he explained some things and he definitely shed some tears. I was very stoic because I wasn't vulnerable at all. I'm already outside of my comfort zone. You're not going to see anything from me. We had a really good conversation, all things considered. And what really shifted for me that day, and this might sound a little cold and calculated, but I looked at a man and I saw someone who has not done any self-work, has very little self-awareness. And I realized that I gave the power to this person to villainize, or I villainized someone and gave him the power to control my life for so long when not only did he not deserve it, he was not capable of handling it. And that gave me a level of empathy. I've worked very diligently on myself and he never has. And it's almost like in that situation, I was the father and I was kind of looking at my son, and that was super weird. So I left that day being very, very proud of myself because I feel like there was this giant void that I never thought I was going to close. And I left that day in forgiveness. I have forgiven my dad. It is what it is. We're all fallible humans. He made mistakes. The philosophical question is, would I be better off if he was there? The answer is maybe not. I might be better off that he wasn't there based on some of the things I heard. I ended up spending a few times with him after that. And then I decided that I think I got what I needed out of the relationship and out of the experience. And also, again, this might sound cold, and I mean this very humbly, but I'm very, very, very busy. And I'm not exactly the type of person you can just call on a Wednesday and say, "Hey, Kev, what's going on?" or get offended when I don't answer the phone. So there were some things that happened after where I realized I am not willing to put in the effort necessary to grow this relationship. I'm not willing to invest in it enough to make it long-term or sustainable. So I kind of let it die off. But it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me what I'm capable of in terms of being courageous. And I feel like it allowed me to heal such an open wound that I had for so long, where my dad made mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I don't think he woke up one day and decided he wanted to try to sabotage my life. I don't think that was the case. I think he made a big mistake and he regrets it. And hopefully he took away lessons that day as well. That would be the goal for me.
You know, Kevin, I hear what you're saying, and there's such humility in what you're saying. And I don't think it comes across as cold or uncalculated at all. I think it's more a question of, well, you didn't have the relationship with him. It brought what you learned, the lessons in the time that you needed to learn. And the fact that you're forgiven him and you're free to now live your life is a huge, huge story and a huge way that you can help others in that. How did that forgiveness impact other areas of your life?
I think it just really allowed me to have empathy. I don't know what it's like to be in the position my dad was in and have a kid. I don't have children, nor am I planning on having children. I don't know what that's like. I have no idea. That was one thing. The other thing was I've had a chip on my shoulder for a long time, for as long as I can remember. I've always been the little guy. I was never that smart. I never felt good enough. So I've always had a big, big chip on my shoulder. And I think seeing him allowed me to use the chip more than the chip was using me. I feel now I'm in control of it. The fire is lit, but the fire is not engulfing me. I'm using the fire to fuel me. So I think that was a big thing. And then it made me understand at a pretty deep level why a lot of us don't grow. Because although that was one of the most important things I've ever done in my entire life, it also was one of the hardest. I was terrified of that day. And I understand that maybe if you're out there, maybe you don't have the courage to do that big thing yet. And that big thing might set you free in many different ways. But I completely understand why you haven't done it yet. If that happened 5 years earlier and I was in my early 20s, I don't think I would have done it. I was at a very humble point in my life where I had just kind of lost everything. I was lonely. I was going through it. I was into self-improvement. It made sense. So I think that was a really important lesson for me. And I think it also helps me connect with people who have similar experiences. I can say I don't know your exact experience, and I don't know why the person that left your life, but forgiveness is for you. It's not for them. Forgiveness is for you. It's not about forgiving them for them. It's about forgiving them for you. This is the other thing too, maybe the biggest thing. I do believe that if I was earlier in life, I probably would have tried really, really hard to get my dad to show love for me when I actually, for the first time ever, felt like I loved myself, so I didn't really need it. I felt like I didn't have anything to prove. I don't have to prove anything to you. I'm proving it to myself, and I'm doing my thing, and you can watch from a distance, and that's fine. But I didn't really feel like I had anything to prove to him because I felt like I was proving it to myself. And that might be the biggest lesson I could share from that experience.
That's so powerful. And I think if you could speak more into that, because that self-love and being secure in yourself is so key and fundamental to change and not being dictated by your external circumstances. Obviously, that was a process. Speak about that process, about self-love and becoming secure in who you are and owning your own identity. Because as we've worked with clients and as we've worked with and also done podcasts and listened to stories, what I realize is sometimes people's identity is attached to external things. Like your identity is attached to your job, your identity is attached to being a mother, and when your children leave the home, you have an identity crisis. But it sounds to me you were secure in who you were. What would you say to someone who has their identity attached to something external?
I would say try to get to the point where you can admit it. It's always the admittance factor. It starts with that. The journey of my life is very interesting because it's almost like in the beginning, nobody really had high expectations for me. I wasn't supposed to be successful. I definitely wasn't supposed to be where I am today. But even when I was in my late 20s, I was somewhat successful, and I don't think I was supposed to get there. So it's almost like early in life, I had very little external. So I think I tried to work on internal, even though at that point it was just character. I've always wanted to be a good man. If you remember nothing about me and you say he was a good man, I did my job. That's all I care about. I'm very focused on that. Then later in life, I focused externally and I wanted to get hyper successful. I was never a bad man, but I wasn't working on my character as much. Then I lost all of my success and I was the least successful I'd ever been. And I went back to working on the inner side. I think we have to understand, is my identity creating external success Or is my identity creating internal fulfillment? Because I think internal fulfillment, if it comes first, you're going to be really good at creating external success because it's going to be aligned. But if you're focused on creating external results, you might wake up one day and say, damn, I don't know if I even care about what I've created. So I would say the best answer I could give is when I lost everything and when I left my job, it gave me the opportunity to say, I don't have a 6-figure income anymore. I don't have a model girlfriend. I don't have any level of success with a podcast. No one cares. I'm kind of off the map. I've kind of just like completely disappeared off the map. And I remember I had a moment where I was walking around the kitchen and I said, I'm really proud of myself. I'm really proud of what I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing something that truly matters. So I think that that's a big piece of it. You set a goal that you know will challenge you, that you know will stretch you, but not so you can get the goal. It's so you can become the type of person who is capable of creating, attracting, and sustaining the results of that goal. That's been a big piece of this for me. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the goals I have. And I think just trying to be humble. Life is a long journey, long journey. And if you're willing to say, yeah, I got some stuff to work on. I got some stuff to work on. And you're surrounded by people who also say, I got some stuff to work on too. And you got your stuff and let's work on our stuff together. And let's be vulnerable. Let's be honest. Let's keep it real. That's a big thing too. I'm surrounded by people who want to get better and they want to see me get better. So that's a big piece of it. That's always been a big piece of it. And I would say this is probably the biggest thing for me. I learned this yesterday. So this is hot off the press. I am realizing one of the things that drives me more than anything is the fear of disappointing others. I will give you everything I have in this interview because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you to leave and say, should we release that? Are we going to release that? I don't ever want that. I don't want anybody to meet me and say, I really wish Kev was this. I really wish he gave me more time. I'm shorter than you think. So if you think I'm going to be 6'2", you will be disappointed. I'll throw that out there now. But I am afraid of being left behind. So one of the ways I've grown as much as I have and try to be as humble as I have and try to be courageous as I have is I realize if I don't continue growing, I'm going to lose everybody I love. And that scares me. So I think that's a big piece of it. And I think just the humility of, I got to keep growing. I'm not good enough. Intrinsically, I am. Intrinsically, I'm whole and I'm a great person and I have value. But externally, I'm not good enough to get to where I want to yet. And I don't think that's disempowering. And that full circle will bring it back. I think that's one of the things that made the difference for self-love is I admitted the fact that I could love myself intrinsically, but I would love myself a hell of a lot more if I put some effort into evolving as a human. So I could be really proud of what I've created. It's the perception behavior thing. I could change my perception and just say, I'm great the way I am. I don't ever have to change. I'm perfect. Or I could change my behavior and say, yeah, you know what? I wish I was a better speaker. I wish I was more eloquent. I wish I understood people that aren't like me more. I wish I was more balanced. I wish I was less toxic. And that all goes back to the vulnerability piece, vulnerability and courage. So I don't know if that answered the question. I feel like I went off on a tangent, but that would be my answer.
Absolutely. Because what I'm hearing from that is you own every aspect of who you are. You own your good parts, you own your bad parts. And again, it goes back to what you said, vulnerability is living in your truth. And you are totally into that truth of who you are as a human. So that is so powerful.
And like I noticed, like through your story so far, there's been many moments that you've had that self-awareness of where you're at and where you need to be and where you'd like to be. And at the same time, there seems to be this self-acceptance of all these facets of, where you're at. So what is the importance for you of self-awareness? Has it always been important for you, or is it just something more new to you?
It's something I didn't even know about in 2017. 2016, 2017 was a really interesting time for me because I started self-improvement for the first time. So that was the first time I really ever understood it. But it's helped me a lot with my insecurities because when you're self-aware enough to admit your insecurities, you can then hopefully remedy them. One of the best examples of this I have, right? So Alan and I were out in California for a Brendan Burchard event. And at this point, we had achieved a certain level of success. So we had some connections in California. So we kind of set up this podcast tour where we interviewed 5 or 6 people while we were out there. We went to their houses. It was awesome. And we went to this guy's house. His name is Brant Pinvidic. He was the producer of The Biggest Loser and Extreme Weight Loss, a bunch of different shows. And he has this really beautiful home in California. So we go and we bring all our podcast equipment as we do, and we interview him in his movie theater. Imposter syndrome. I don't know how the hell I got here. This is weird. Okay, cool. We're going to do this. And he has this ritual where when he has guests over, he has this Benihana style grill that he wheels out into the backyard around his pool, and he cooks for people. And I was like, okay, this is super weird, but all right, love it. After we ate, Alan, my business partner, who is the most intelligent human I've ever met, bar none, he's a genius, was having business talks with Brant. And I got super insecure. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. Are these two guys arrogant? Are they bad people? What's going on here? And I had a conversation with myself where I said, number one, is this a me problem or a them problem? Is it them that's making me feel this way? Or is the fact that I'm just getting insecure in my own stuff? All right, let me sit with that. And I had a very real conversation with Alan after. I said, hey, man, I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't feel smart enough. I don't know if I'm smart enough to get to where I want to get to. And he said, well, what if you're just not smart enough yet? And that was the day where I started learning. I haven't missed a day of learning since then. So self-awareness creates opportunity. Hiding from self-awareness creates stagnation. I think I've always had the belief that if I find a problem, at least I can start working on it. I'm the type of person where if something happened right before this interview and I needed to attend to it, I could not be present with you. I'd be like freaking out internally because I need to fix the problem. And I just think that's helped me with self-awareness because I have had the belief that I am capable of solving or improving the problem. I would say that's been the biggest thing. Understanding that my insecurities will remain insecurities unless I become self-aware to the control that they have over me and then put some sort of plan into place so I can overcome it. You'll hear me make jokes about how short I am. That's a coping mechanism, but that came from, I'm very insecure about that. That's self-awareness. And I don't want that to run my life. And it has for long enough. So I think that's the biggest thing. My insecurities have created the opportunity for me to become self-aware and then take new action because of it.
Awesome. That's powerful. I love that. My insecurities will remain my insecurities until I become aware of them. Such a powerful statement, and self-awareness creates opportunity. So, Kevin, we've heard your journey, we've heard your story, and we've heard how you've become a whole person. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing now and what opportunities has when you started off in podcast, because you're totally a whole brand now, you and your business partner, and it started off in podcasting. Tell our audience how that evolved for you.
In the very beginning, it was, I want to have cool conversations with cool people. And that was pretty much it. That was the level of goals I had in the beginning. Then when I went through that rock bottom basement moment, and I said, wow, if I could do this podcasting thing more, that would be awesome. If I could make this like my full-time gig, that would be amazing. So when I left my job, Alan and I partnered up and we said, all right, we're going to do this together. We both grew up without fathers. His father passed away in a car accident when he was 2. I didn't know mine. So we were both raised by single parents, women in the household, really. We both believed at a deep level that if we had self-improvement in our lives earlier, our lives would have looked drastically different. And we both believed very heavily in consistency and hard work ethic. So it made sense for us to partner up. So when we partnered up, a lot of it, this is the weird thing. For the first year and a half, 2 years, we didn't try to make money at all. We were really working on our characters. We had realized that the majority of our listeners are women, and we were just bodybuilding bros. Nothing against you if you're a bodybuilding bro. I'm still a bodybuilding bro at heart. But I remember we had a lot of conversations, challenging, tear-filled conversations of, look, the men we used to be, that's not going to fly anymore. We can't be like that. We have to be balanced. We have to be positive. We have to be healthy, masculine men. And we have to get rid of and uncondition all that garbage that maybe we were raised around. So that was like the first 2 years. And it was brutal and it was challenging. And there was a lot of tears and I will say powerful conversations, heated conversations, not arguments, but heated conversations. And then I was $35,000 in credit card debt. I could barely afford to pay rent. I couldn't buy Christmas presents for my now wife. And I said, dude, I got to start making money, man. I love this podcast thing. I love helping people, but damn, I am broke. I am broke. So he said, you should start coaching people for free. And I was like, I don't know if you understand what I said. The money part, I need that. And he said, Kev, number one, you've never coached anybody in this capacity. Number two, nobody's going to pay you yet because you don't have a record. And number three, I think you needed to build your confidence. So I ended up coaching 5 people for free. And at the end of 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was, I said, hey, I can't do this for free anymore. What do you think of $50 a call? And everybody said yes. And I was like, whoa, no way. I'm making money now. And then from there, it just evolved. We had opportunities to connect with a lot of amazing people. We were mentored by David Meltzer for a long time, mentored by Evan Carmichael. Evan Carmichael's a friend now. When we saw an opportunity to bring value to a new audience or in a new way, that's what we did. So we ended up starting a podcast production company. Right now, we produce 55 shows. We did a lot of business coaching. Then we did group coaching. And then we did live events. That really was what it was. It was, okay, how do we add value through as many channels as humanly possible? How do we add free value through as many channels as humanly possible? And then how do we monetize this podcast without ever using ads or sponsorships or affiliates and actually turn this into a real business where we make money and put it back into the business and we desire to have the most successful self-improvement podcast on the planet. So that's what we're playing for. And yeah, it's been a very humbling, I have to pinch myself pretty often. Some days I don't know how we got here. It's weird. I don't know how I'm the CFO of a company when I didn't even go to college and I don't know anything about math. So that's always interesting. But it's created a lot of opportunities. But transparently, although life is the best it's ever been and I'm the most fulfilled holistically I've ever been, my life is also the most challenging it's ever been. Not close, bar none. This week was one of the hardest weeks I've ever had in my life. But I'm grateful to have the problems I do because many of the problems I have today are the problems I would have wished for 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. So there's been many, many opportunities. We've grown a ton, but we try to remain understanding that at the end of the day, the whole point of this, the whole goal of this, the whole mission of this is to put self-improvement into the pocket of every single person on the planet every single day for free. That really is the goal for us.
You just said something. The problems I have today is the problems I wished for 5 years ago. So the problems don't go away just because you have success.
Success makes life harder, not easier. It depends on what you want to do, but I don't know. With opportunity comes overwhelm. I don't know if there's any other way to avoid that. And it's nice, right? If you cut it off right after I said all the success stuff, you'd be like, that was a good podcast. But the truth of the matter is, yeah, I'm the most overwhelmed. I get burnt out pretty much every week. But my goals dictate what's necessary. If you just want to have a somewhat successful podcast, it might not be that way for you. And that's totally fine. And I mean, that's a really good point where understanding to really decipher every piece of advice you get based on your goals, not somebody else's. The last thing you need to do is live your life like me unless you have similar goals to me. And even then, maybe you can do it differently.
Kevin, one thing I'm hearing throughout the podcast is you're a very consistent human being. And why do you believe consistency is so important?
If you both sat me down and you said, I'll give you $1 million today if you can do the splits, I would try and I would probably hurt myself. I don't think I get the million. But if I said, let me make you a deal. I'll give you 500,000 of it back. Give me $500,000, 365 days from today if I can do the splits. You might not even take that. You might say, I don't know, a year is a long time. And the reason is because I can consistently practice the splits for the next 365 days, and I'll most likely be able to do them by the end. But the odds of that happening drastically goes down if I say, you know what, I'll do once a week. 52 times, yeah, that might be enough. Or if I say, I'll just do it once a month. 12 times, I don't think almost anything is going to happen. Consistency is necessary in order to build success and then build success upon success. And the other thing about consistency that I think often gets unspoken about is when you're consistent, you get to learn lessons that you don't get to actually use until you're consistent enough to get to the level where you can use them. So my analogy for that is in the first level of the video game, you find a sword. You assume in the second level, you're going to use a sword. Third level, no. Fourth, fifth, sixth, no. You get to the 8th level and it's like, oh yeah, I got to cut through this rope. I got this sword. But if you stop at the 7th level, you never get to use the sword. I think that's what happens to a lot of us. I know a lot of people who say, yeah, I used to be a podcaster. You'd still be a podcaster if you kept going. You just stopped. You weren't consistent. I used to be a bodybuilder. I used to have a really good relationship, whatever. I used to have a lot of money. When you stop doing the things that get you to the dance, you don't get to dance anymore. And I think that's why consistency is so important. And a lot of us say, well, I'm just not consistent. I don't think that's true. You might just be consistent in the wrong direction. I don't know if I'm any more consistent than your average person. I would argue that I'm just more consistent in the right direction. If you hit snooze every day, you're consistent. If you stop at the drive-thru every day, get a coffee, a Danish, and whatever else, you're consistent. Your behavior is consistent. It's just not consistent with the results you want. So I think that's an important thing to throw out there too, is humans are consistent by nature. We're just not always consistent in the ways that serve us the most.
That's really powerful. Throughout your journey, and a lot of our listeners, they're reevaluating their lives, they're reevaluating their paths through a different lens, but not really sure what their purpose in life is. How does someone find their purpose? Do they have to hit rock bottom? Do they have to struggle?
I hope they don't have to hit rock bottom, but I do believe pain is something that helps us get clear on what matters to us, unfortunately. My grandmother fell and broke her hip recently, and she got double pneumonia. And I was spending a lot of time with my family, a lot more time than I have in the past 5 years. Shows you what's important when you're in pain. So I do think pain is probably more necessary than we hope. This is my thought. I'm sure you've heard the question, if I gave you $1 million, what would you do? And the problem with that question that I've gotten when I ask people is they say, I just sip margaritas on the beach. Okay, that's not going to work. If you never had to worry about money again for the rest of your life, and you had to do something in the service of others or the world, what would it be? AKA, what do you love doing so much that you would do it for free even if you never got paid for it? I love that question because you're willing to say some stuff that might even sound silly. I'd hang out with dogs all day. There's a way to do that. I'd read books all day. There's a way to do that. You're a book editor. You're a dog walker. You have a dog park, whatever it is. I like that question because I think that allows us to tap into our imagination and get out of the logic of, well, that's not possible. And the reason I like the imagination part is because I think many of us, if we allowed ourselves to sit down and say, what would I do if I could do anything? We would come up with an answer. But when we try to cross the chasm of, I don't know what the vehicle is, most purposes, us three, we have very similar purposes. We want to help a certain type of person in a certain type of way, get a unique result. That's what we want to do. We want to help people. Most businesses are the same way. They want to make life easier. Uber, Airbnb, it's all the same. So the purpose is usually to help a unique person in a unique way. The vehicle is where we get stuck because how am I going to make money with a podcast? How am I going to make money as a dog walker? I want to start a coffee mug business. Nobody's ever going to pay for that. I think that's where we get stuck. The purpose is what you would do if there was no money involved. It's the thing you love. It's the thing you lose track of time. This is my purpose. If you can't tell, I love this. It's my favorite thing in the world. The vehicle is where I think a lot of us get stuck. Because if we don't think it's possible, if we don't think it's sustainable, we're not going to continue pouring it. So that's the question I would ask. And then when you come up with an answer, I would start checking the way other people have been able to bring a vehicle into the world that serves the same purpose as the purpose that you just landed on.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for exploring that because, and I love that you did say, pain sometimes does clarify the purpose.
Unfortunately, I didn't set it up that way, but unfortunately, pain is a wonderful motivator. I'm willing to bet if I put $100 bill on the ceiling and said, jump and get that $100 bill versus I put a fire under your feet, I'm willing to bet you'll probably jump higher with the fire just because it's painful and you want to get out of it. Humans usually are wired more to avoid pain than they are to seek pleasure, depending. There's a lot of opportunity to seek pleasure with social media and digital stuff. So it depends.
I feel like you might have alluded to this before, but in regards to the whole consistency factor, I know a lot of people might get to a certain point of success and then they stop doing the things that they did to get to that success. What do you feel is the thing that really stops someone from doing that? Like, what is it that, and how can they actually continue with that consistency?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple things under that. Some people, they work really, really, really hard so they can stop working really, really, really hard. That's something that a lot of people do. It's just like, there's two frames. Unfortunately, a lot of us jump in the pool and we say, okay, I'm in the pool. I got to collect all the rings as soon as possible. And then I'm going to get out of the pool. And I think that happens often. When you're living in your purpose, your passion, your mission, your calling, you jump in the pool. You don't know how to swim. You say, I want to learn how to swim because I want to stay in this pool forever. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is I don't know if they ever really loved what they were doing, or they loved it for the results they were getting. And once they got the result, they lost the ambition. So usually that's more of like a surface level thing is what I've seen. It's just probably not the real purpose. And this is something I've seen very, very often. I used to think the fear of failure was everything. I didn't know anybody was ever afraid of success. Didn't make any sense to me. Then I started talking to people and I started to realize, oh my goodness, you're afraid of success. So a couple thoughts. One, if this resonates with you, maybe you're afraid of success. If you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, every time I grow, every time I've ever added another accolade to my resume, every time I've done something really amazing, I've been villainized, I've been made to feel bad, and I've been treated badly by people who don't want to see me win, you might have a fear of success. Because if every time you succeed, you get hate, that's not necessarily rewarding. That's one. And this is the second one. I was working with a gentleman one time and he said, you know what, Kev, I just don't think I believe in myself enough. And I said, I don't know. I don't think that's it. I said, okay, let's do this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe you can create the business you want, the podcast you want, the income you want, the body you want, the relationship you want? How much do you believe in your own unique capabilities to do that? And he looked at me and smiled. He said, 10 out of 10. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you feel that you deserve all of the amazing results that come with all of the things that you just said? And he looked at me and then he looked down and he said, oh no, maybe 2 out of 10. I said, this is not a self-belief issue, brother. This is a self-worth issue. I think that's another thing that happens to us going to the self-sabotage. If you do not feel you are worthy of a result, you will find a way to give it away. And I think that can happen. If you get further, if you get beyond what you expected and you don't know how to live there anymore, you're going to pump the brakes because success can be too far outside of your comfort zone. It's too far out of your safety zone. If you're being seen for the first time, that can be a lot. So I would say it's usually one of those things from my experience and what I've seen. I would say it's, usually one of those three.
Yeah, that's powerful. Kevin, we usually like to end our podcast with 2 questions that are always the same.
Okay.
And the first one is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to rewrite their own life story?
If you want to rewrite something, you have to read it first. If you want to change your future, you have to understand your past and your present. So I would say sit down and really get very, very clear on who you are, what you've done to get here today, and then you can make the edits. Don't assume that you have to change your life today. You don't have to. You can do one small thing. That's the thing. We write one letter, one word, one page, one chapter, one book at a time. So don't be afraid to set small goals. Small goals add up to big goals eventually. That's what I would say. I was always told if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. I am scared of everything. So I'm not going to set goals then. I don't need goals. I'm scared of everything. Then I started setting smaller goals and then I started proving myself right and I got momentum. We always say this on stage. I think most of us have been lied to. People who have 10 out of 10 confidence tell you if you don't have 10 out of 10 confidence, you can't win. I don't think that's true. I think if you have 1 out of 10 confidence, you should set 2 out of 10 goals. And then when you get those, you can set 3 out of 10 and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah. So finally, Kevin, if you were to go back and rewrite your own life story, what would that look like now?
Cliche. It's going to be very cliche. I think I would leave it exactly the same. I don't know if I would change anything. Now, if I was really struggling, maybe I would, but the lessons I have, the experiences I have, the perspective I have made me the man that you see in front of you. And for better or worse, I am unconditioning a lot of the things that were holding me back and using a lot of the traumas, triggers, and issues I had to continue growing and evolving. So I would say I'd read it again so I could understand myself at a deeper level, but I think I'd probably keep the eraser in my pocket.
It's beautiful.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you want to know more about Kevin and Next Level University, all his links are in the bio as well as his social media handles. Kevin, thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now that we've interviewed our guest, join Charlene and I as we recap today's episode. I just love Kevin.
Oh my gosh, isn't he an absolute riot?
Yeah, and he's actually crushing it. But you know what I really loved? His heart space.
Yes.
It's all about the people. And you know what? You can tell that this is something he would do without money.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, he said, your purpose is something you would do without paid, getting paid for it. And he would absolutely do this.
Absolutely. Everything that he spoke about, everything, like his whole energy today just really gave that, oozed that sense that this is something he's passionate about, something he would continue doing.
I love the fact that he said, vulnerability is living in your truth.
Yes.
And that is such a powerful statement, but yet it's a statement that a lot of people would struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's about taking off that mask. It's about allowing, and with vulnerability, I remember once, and I can't remember what we were teaching, but I remember someone asked a question and it was around relationships and being hurt. And I think it was you who said, with love comes hurt. Mm-hmm. So if you're not willing to be hurt, then you're not willing to receive love or be loved, because they come hand in hand. Yeah. And I think that's what he's talking about with vulnerability.
Yeah. It can be a scary thing because people feel that, if they're being open, if they're being real, will someone still love me? Will someone still appreciate or value me for who I am rather than who I want them to think I am?
And it then alluded to the point, is my identity creating external results or internal fulfillment?
That's right. It really ties in together beautifully, doesn't it?
Yeah. So your identity needs to fulfill you from within, not from without. But when he also said, when your internal is fulfillment, then it comes to fruition on the outside. Yeah. So I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share it with your friends and family. Also, make sure to visit our website at www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au to learn more about our mission, products and services. And remember, you have the power to rewrite your own life story. So go out there, face your challenges head on and create the life you've always wanted. We'll see you in the next episode.